There's a conversation happening in your mind that you didn't consciously start, but it's been talking to you actually for years. It shows up when pressure rises, when things don't go as you have planned, when the decisions that you're making, it seems to be carrying more weight. Most people think that they're reacting to circumstances when they're actually not. They're really responding to a script that's already running. So if your reactions feel predictable, if you already know how you're going to feel before something eventually happens, it's not because life keeps repeating, it's because the same internal script keeps pressing play. Hi, my name is Robert L. Robinson III, and I'm the author of a powerful habit transformation book that I've titled Disruptive Habits Breaking Free. I help leaders just like yourself, not with inspiration, not motivation, but I like to give you practical strategies in order for you to identify your negative habits, disrupt them with more positive ones in order to build the life that you always dreamed of. Most people explain their reactions as personality flaws. They say things like, this is just how I am. I've always reacted this way. I just can't really help myself. But reactions are rarely spontaneous. In fact, they're rehearsed. There's a sentence that appears internally before the reaction ever happens. Now, this script may sound like, this never works out for me. I should have known better. Or here we go again. Now, those phrases, they feel automatic, and they are automatic because they've been practiced. And whatever gets rehearsed in your mind, it gets repeated. Not because you are weak, but because your brain prefers what is familiar. All of our brains is really designed for efficiency. And so once it learns a pattern, it tries to reuse it. It tries to look into its storage bank to see if this situation occurred before and what did we do. Now, those internal scripts are the brain's shortcut system. Instead of evaluating each moment as a fresh situation, the brain pulls from that stored language that you have already input into it. That's why certain situations trigger the same emotional response every single time. Let me give you the pattern here. First, the script is going to appear. Then you're going to get emotional. It's going to follow that. And then your behavior is going to come last. Now, this isn't emotional immaturity. It's actually a neurological automation. And automation, it always feels personal until it is understood. I was watching a documentary on Thomas Edison. Most people focus on his inventions, the phonograph, the motion film cameras, or even the incandescent light bulb. But few pay attention to how he interpreted failure. Edison ran thousands of experiments that did not work, but he refused to call them failures. His internal script wasn't that I failed again. It wasn't saying that I'm not cut out for this. He never said that I should quit, but his script actually was closer to, this is information that's going to ultimately get me to my final destination. Now, that single sentence changed his response, because when failure had meant information, there was no emotional collapse. And so disappointment, it didn't trigger his retreat. His feedback, it didn't feel very personal. And his persistence, it felt very logical. But here's what matters most. Edison, he didn't just think differently. He built habits. He built systems that reinforced that script. He worked in structured cycles, and this was the very blueprint that I saw. He first tested, then he observed, then he adjusted, and then he repeated. That was the blueprint. And so instead of waiting for inspiration, he created routines where his experiments became very normal. His internal script said that progress comes from iteration. So his habits had followed. So he experimented daily, then he immediately documented, he had a rapid adjustment, and then he was consistent to return to the work after he had compiled that data. He wasn't reacting emotionally to the results. He was responding methodically to that information. Edison didn't outwork his failure, he outscripted it. And here's where leaders really need to pay attention, because leaders, we just don't carry personal scripts. We create organizational scripts. A leader who repeatedly says that this always turns into a problem. We tried this before. This team always struggles with follow through. It's not just venting at the end of the day. You're really teaching people how to interpret your difficulty. And over time, your team is going to anticipate failure. The initiative is going to drop. And then ownership is going to be dismal. It's going to shrink. But high-level leaders are intentional about interpreting negative scripts before they become culture. They understand this, that culture isn't built by one big moment. Let me say that one more time. Your culture is not built by one big moment, but it's built by repeated language. Leaders, we just don't shape outcomes, but we shape the interpretation of those outcomes. I was reading a book by Jocko Willink. It was called Extreme Ownership, and he makes a simple but uncomfortable point. He said, leaders, we don't just get the culture that we want, we get the culture that our thinking produces. And ownership doesn't start with behavior, it starts with the internal script of a leader that runs under pressure. And so if the script says that this shouldn't be my problem, then deflection is going to start to feel justified. If the script says that my team just doesn't get it, then blame, it feels very reasonable. If the script says that this is out of my control, then disengagement is going to start to feel logical. But in that book, Extreme Ownership, it exposes something, and that is that before a leader avoids responsibility externally, they've already released that ownership internally. And remember what I said about the pattern. The script comes first, and then your behavior is going to follow. That's why two leaders, they can face the same failure and respond completely differently. One might ask, what do I own in this situation? And then the other one will look around and try to say, well, who dropped the ball in this situation? This is the same situation, same circumstance, a different script, and then ultimately it's going to produce a different outcome. And high-level leaders, we understand this, that we're not going to wait until behavior breaks down to talk about accountability. We're going to pay attention to the language that's running inside of them before the pressure hits. Because ownership is not about a policy. It's not something that's just written down. It's not posted on a wall. It's practiced as an internal script. You have to have this on the inside. And whatever script a leader rehearses, then the organization, it eventually is going to adopt. And so let me give you a practical solution. Here's a practice. When you notice a strong reaction, you have to pause and really ask yourself, what sentence just played out in my mind? When you ask yourself, I don't want you to correct it yet. I don't want you to fight it. I just want you to name it, because scripts tend to really lose power internally when they're brought into your awareness externally. You don't eliminate scripts by force. You replace them with intentionality. And so ask yourself, what sentence shows up most often when things don't really go as I have planned? And if you lead others, ask yourself, what script might my language be rehearsing or reinforcing without me really realizing it internally. This work isn't really about controlling thoughts. That's not what I want you to do. It's about really becoming aware of what is already running in your background in that stored language. February, it's about restraining the inner system that really shapes our reactions, our decisions, and ultimately our leadership. Because when the script changes, then the response changes. Because transformation, it does not happen by accident. It's built system after system. Now, if this is something that resonates with you, I need you to go to my website. My website is robertlrobinson3.com. On there, I have a free guide. It's called the Build Strategy. It is going to start you on your transformation process in order to build the life that you always dreamed of. Because remember what I said, transformation, it doesn't happen by accident. You have to internalize that script that you have, and then you have to be aware of it and essentially turn that language into something positive. As always, I need you to believe in yourself. You got this, and always follow the blueprint.